A guy makes $48,000 a year as a junior accountant. He's broke. 5 years later, same guy, now making $82,000, still broke. 10 years after that, he's a senior manager pulling $135,000. You'd think he's comfortable, right? He's got less cash in his checking account than he did at 48. His friend became a plumber, never climbed any ladder, stayed at $65,000 for 20 years. That guy owns his house outright and has $400,000 in index funds. What happened? Here's the thing. The accountant was on a treadmill that sped up every time he ran faster. And here's the part that'll make you uncomfortable. The system was designed that way on purpose. So I'm going to explain exactly how the paycheck trap works, why it's not about your income level, and why the psychological shift required to escape it has nothing to do with budgeting apps or cutting back on lattes. Because the trap isn't what you think it is. By the way, I built a free early retirement calculator because most online ones are mathematically wrong. It uses BlackRock and Vanguard logic to expose the weak points in your plan, and I only ask for your email to send the report, so I don't store any of your financial data. Link in the description. The central mechanism here is what I call the ratchet. Think about a ratchet wrench. It only turns one direction. Click, 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 never backwards. Your expenses work exactly the same way, except nobody told you there was a ratchet installed in your financial life. Every time your income increases, the ratchet clicks forward. Your expenses rise to meet it. But when your income drops, or you want to save more, or you face an emergency, that ratchet doesn't click backward. It's stuck. You're stuck. Let me tell you about Marcus. Real guy, ran a construction business in Ohio. In 2003, he was making about $70,000 a year. Lived in a 1,200 square foot house, drove a paid off truck, felt pretty good about life. By 2006, his business was booming. Revenue jumped to $220,000. Know what he did? Bought a bigger house. Upgraded to a 3,000 square foot place because, quote, it made sense for tax purposes and we needed the space. Monthly payment went from $800 to $2,400. Then he leased a new truck because he needed to look successful for clients. That was another $700 a month. His wife quit her part-time job that brought in $18,000 a year because we don't need it anymore. Then 2008 hit. Revenue dropped to $90,000, but the house payment, still $2,400. The truck lease, still $700. The lifestyle, still calibrated for $220,000. The ratchet had clicked forward. It wouldn't click back. Marcus filed for bankruptcy in 2010. Now, you might be thinking this is just a story about living beyond your means, and sure, that's part of it. But here's what's actually happening at a systems level, and this is where it gets really interesting. The United States tax code is a ratchet mechanism. Let's say you're single, making $60,000 a year. Your effective federal tax rate is around 11%. Sounds reasonable. Now you get a promotion. You're making $90,000. You think, great, I'm making $30,000 more. That's $2,500 extra per month. Except no. That additional $30,000 is taxed at 22% federal, plus 7.6 to 5% FICA on the first chunk, plus, let's say 6% state tax if you're in a median state. You're actually keeping about $18,000 of that $30,000 raise. That's $1,500 a month, not $2,500. But wait, it gets better. At $60,000, you might have qualified for certain credits or deductions that phase out as income rises. Maybe you were getting a small earned income tax credit benefit, or your student loan interest deduction was fully available, or you qualified for a premium tax credit on health insurance. Those phase outs, they're invisible tax increases. The real marginal rate on that raise isn't 22%. For many people in that 60 to 90,000 range, once you factor in benefit phase outs, the effective marginal rate is closer to 35 to 40%. So you think you got a 50% raise. In reality, your take-home went up, maybe 25%. The ratchet clicked halfway forward. But your brain doesn't calculate marginal rates. Your brain says, I make $90,000 now instead of $60,000. I'm a $90,000 person, and $90,000 people don't drive 10-year-old Hondas. The ratchet clicks the rest of the way. There's a concept in economics called the hedonic treadmill. The idea is that humans adapt to new circumstances and return to a baseline level of happiness. You get a raise, you're happy for a few weeks, then it's normal. You buy a bigger house, same thing. The problem is the treadmill is linked to your identity, and your identity is weirdly linked to your income level. I know a guy, software engineer in Austin, who went from $85,000 to $140,000 when he switched jobs in 2021. First thing he did, not consciously, just it happened, was change his reference group. He stopped hanging out with his old buddies from his previous job who made similar money. Started spending more time with people at his new company who made $140,000 to $200,000. Those people lived in different neighborhoods, they took different vacations, they had different cars, they went to different restaurants. Within 6 months, his entire lifestyle had shifted. His expenses went from about $4,000 a month to almost $8,000. The ratchet clicked forward. His savings rate? Identical to when he made $85,000, about 8%. This isn't a willpower problem. This is a systems problem. The system is designed to capture incremental income. By the way, hit subscribe if you like the content. Otherwise, YouTube's algorithm may never show you my videos again. Here's the part that's going to make you uncomfortable. The paycheck trap isn't primarily about taxes or lifestyle inflation. Those are symptoms. The trap is psychological, and it's built on a framework that's taught to you from childhood. The framework is this: more income equals more success equals more security. So the rational thing to do is always pursue more income. Get the promotion, switch jobs for more money, climb the ladder. That framework is correct for the institution you work for. It is catastrophically wrong for you personally, because here's what actually happens. Every time you increase your income through a job, you're making a trade. You're trading time and energy and mental space for money. And as you move up, the ratio gets worse, not better. A junior analyst making $60,000 might work 45 hours a week. A senior manager making $130,000 is working 55 to 60 hours a week, plus weekends, plus they're on call mentally all the time. The per hour rate improved, sure, but the total time extraction increased. You have less time to think about your finances, less energy to optimize, less mental space to even consider building something outside your job. The ratchet clicked forward on your time too. Meanwhile, here's the thing nobody tells you. Building wealth has almost nothing to do with income level and everything to do with the gap between income and expenses sustained over time. That's it. That's the whole game. Let me give you a specific scenario. Two guys, both 35 years old. Guy A makes $120,000 a year, spends $90,000, invests $30,000. Guy B makes $75,000, spends $45,000, invests $30,000. They both invest in boring index funds, average 8% annual return over the next 20 years. At 55, they both have about $1.5 million. Identical outcome. But Guy B had something Guy A didn't. 25 years of working 20% fewer hours, stressing 20% less, and having the mental space to optimize his life in ways that didn't show up on a tax return. Now you might be thinking, okay, but isn't it easier to cut expenses when you make more money? And that is the exact backwards way the trap makes you think. Because no, it's not easier. It's harder, way harder. There's this thing called the Diderot effect, named after an 18th century French philosopher. Diderot was poor, then he came into some money and bought himself a fancy new scarlet dressing gown. Beautiful thing. Except suddenly, his old desk looked shabby next to the gown. So he bought a new desk. Then his old chair looked terrible next to the new desk. New chair. Then the rug, then the curtains. Within a few months, he'd replaced nearly everything he owned. He wrote an essay about it called Regrets on Parting with My Old Dressing Gown. The point is, possessions don't exist in isolation. They exist in clusters. When you upgrade one thing, everything around it suddenly feels inadequate. You buy a house in a nice neighborhood because you can finally afford it. That's the ratchet clicking. But now your old furniture looks cheap in the nice house. Your car looks out of place in the driveway compared to the neighbors. Your wardrobe feels wrong for the social events you're suddenly invited to. You're not keeping up with the Joneses. You are the Joneses now. And the Joneses are broke, too. This is where it gets really interesting. There's a massive invisible barrier at around $250,000 to $300,000 of household income in the United States. You think that's where people finally break free, right? That's where the trap releases? Wrong. That's where it locks hardest. Because At that level, you're suddenly in a different tax bracket, but more importantly, you're in a different social bracket. Your peer group is making similar money. Their kids go to private school, so your kids probably need to as well. That's $25,000 to $50,000 per kid per year. They take international vacations, they have nice cars, they have the nice house in the specific neighborhood with the good schools. The monthly nut for a family in that bracket, living the normal lifestyle for that bracket, is somewhere between $20,000 to $30,000 a month. That's $240,000 to $360,000 per year. After taxes, at $300,000 household income, you're taking home maybe $190,000. You're spending $240,000 or more. Wait, that math doesn't work. Correct. That's why everyone at that level has a home equity line of credit they tap into, or they're slowly liquidating old stock grants, or they're just not saving. The median savings rate for households making $250,000 to $500,000 per year is around 7%, barely better than households making $60,000. The trap is tightest for high earners because they're the most invested in the identity. They spent 20 years climbing to get there. The idea of downshifting, of living like they make $150 when they make $300, feels like failure. It feels like going backward. The ratchet doesn't go backward. Let me tell you about a conversation I had with my accountant back in 2016. I'd had a good year with my business, made about $380,000. I was feeling pretty good about myself, like I made it energy. And he looked at my return and said, you know what's crazy? My client who owns a small plumbing business made $95,000 last year. He paid himself $50,000, left $45,000 in the S-Corp for a down payment on a rental property. No debt, low expenses, 20-year time horizon. He's going to retire wealthier than you if you keep spending like this. That was a cold slap because he was right. I was making 4 times what that guy made, but I was renting a more expensive place, driving a nicer car, going out more, traveling more. I was living like I made $380,000. The plumber was living like he made $35,000 and investing everything else. The psychological shift required to escape the paycheck trap is this. You have to decouple your identity from your income, and you have to decouple your spending from your peer group. Those are the 2 locks on the trap. You can make $200,000 or $80,000. Doesn't matter. If your identity is person who makes X and your spending tracks your peer group, you're trapped. The amount of money flowing through your hands is irrelevant. Here's the part nobody wants to hear. The way out isn't a side hustle. It's not a raise. It's not a better budget app. The way out is realizing that the finish line isn't a higher income. The finish line is the point where your investments generate enough cash flow that you don't need a paycheck anymore. And the only way to get there is to massively widen the gap between what you make and what you spend and sustain that gap for years. Let me give you the actual math on what that looks like. Let's say you want to retire on $50,000 a year in today's money. The 4% rule, which is a rough guideline, says you need about 25 times your annual spending in invested assets. So you need $1.2 to $5 million. If you're 35 and want to retire at 55, that's 20 years. To get to 1.2 to 5 million in 20 years at 8% annual return, you need to invest about $2,600 per month. That's $31,000 per year. If you make $70,000 gross, that's maybe $52,000 net after taxes. You need to live on $21,000 per year. That's tight, but doable in most of the US if you're strategic. If you make $120,000 gross, that's maybe $85,000 net. You need to live on $54,000. That's comfortable in most places. If you make $200,000 gross, that's maybe $130,000 net. You need to live on $99,000. That's very comfortable. Notice the pattern? The higher your income, the easier the math gets, but only if you don't let the ratchet click forward. Most people do the opposite. They let expenses track income. So the person making $70,000 spends $50,000. The person making $120,000 spends $100,000. The person making $200,000 spends $180,000. And they're all saving roughly the same amount. Not enough. The trap is designed to make you feel like you're doing well because your income is going up. But income is a vanity metric. It doesn't matter. The only number that matters is the gap, sustained over time. Now you're asking yourself, okay, but what if I can't cut my expenses enough? What if I live in an expensive city, or I have kids, or I have debt? Fair question. And the answer is going to make you mad, but it's the truth. Then you probably can't retire early, at least not from where you are now. You have 3 options. 1, increase income without increasing expenses, which requires monk-like discipline. 2, decrease expenses dramatically, which might mean moving, changing schools, selling stuff. 3, accept that you're going to work until you're 65 or 70, like everyone else. Those are the options. There's no 4th option where you keep spending at your current level, don't increase income, and still retire at 50. The math doesn't work. Most people pick option 3 and then spend 30 years complaining about it. Here's the thing I learned running a business for over a decade. Working with accountants and fiscal lawyers who manage real money for real people. The people who actually build wealth, the ones who actually escape, they all did the same thing. They made the psychological shift early. They stopped viewing income as the goal and started viewing the gap as the goal. They stopped comparing themselves to their peers and started comparing themselves to their past selves. They stopped trying to look successful and started trying to be free. And here's the dark joke at the center of all of this. The system doesn't want you to figure this out. Your employer wants you to stay on the paycheck treadmill because if you have 2 years of expenses saved, you're dangerous. You can leave. You can negotiate harder. You're not desperate. The consumer economy wants you spending every dollar because that's how GDP grows. The financial services industry wants you confused and scared, so you pay for advice you don't need. The status game wants you spending on visible signals of success, so everyone else feels pressure to do the same. Every incentive structure around you is designed to keep you trapped, not because there's a conspiracy, just because that's what benefits the institution. You escaping doesn't benefit the institution, it benefits you. So let me give you 3 actual non-generic takeaways. 1, track your savings rate, not your income. Your savings rate is the percentage of your after-tax income that you invest. That's the only number that predicts your financial future. If it's under 20%, you're probably going to work until you're old. If it's over 50%, you can retire in 15 years or less from almost any starting point. Make every financial decision based on how it affects that number. 2, once per year, do a full audit of your recurring expenses and kill anything that doesn't directly improve your life. Subscriptions, insurance policies, car payments, housing costs. Most people have $5,000 to $10,000 per year in expenses they don't even notice anymore. That's compounding in reverse. That's the ratchet staying clicked forward when it should have clicked back. 3, make one big decision right. You don't need to optimize every dollar. You need to get the big 3 right: housing, transportation, and food. Those are 60 to 70% of most people's spending. If you keep housing under 25% of gross income, drive paid off cars, and cook most of your meals, you've won. Everything else is noise. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. The paycheck trap isn't about how much you make, it's about whether you let the ratchet click forward every time you do. Most people never escape because they never realize there's a ratchet installed. Now you know. Whether you do anything about it is a different question.